what the hell is going on with Ginjo's powers? Like, why was he able to use Bankai? If you take a step back and have a look at the character as he appears in the Lost Agent arc specifically, it kind of feels like Kubo just took a bunch of ideas and then threw them at the wall to see what would stick. If I was to say to you, what is the special ability of Ginjo's Fullbring cross of scaffold, what would you say? Would you know the answer? Is there a definitive answer at all? Well, at least in the manga, Ginjo has the power to steal other Fullbrings, to dispense portions of said power freely among other Fullbringers, and because he's a substitute Shinigami, he can also share power consensually with other Fullbringers as well, and in return receive a bit of their power too. He can even use Getsuga Tensho and, yes, Bankai, or at least that's what it seems like on the surface. So then, is the power of Ginjo's Fullbring the ability to steal other Fullbrings? Or is that simply an extension of Ginjo's unique power as a substitute Shinigami to share power with Fullbringers? Does that include straight up robbing someone of their Fullbring? And later, we would learn that this ability to steal power isn't just limited to Fullbrings or Fullbringers. Apparently, he stole the power of Shinigami as well. So that brings me back to the question at the center of this video. Why was Ginjo able to use Bankai? We know he's a former substitute Shinigami, but that doesn't automatically guarantee him a Bankai, so what's going on? In today's video, we're going to dive a little deeper into the messy world of Ginjō Kugō's powers. Don't get me wrong, he's one of my favourite characters in Bleach, but the way Kubo chose to obfuscate so much about him has admittedly always frustrated me. Let me know your thoughts on Ginjo's powers down in the comments, and let's get started. Before we do that, however, I just want to say if you want to take your support for the channel that extra step further, consider checking out the Patreon link down in the description. It is a big, big help to the channel. It's helping to keep the lights on, in fact, and I really do appreciate it so, so very much. So if you want to do that, if you want to support the channel, the $2 a month tier is the most popular one, and that gets you your name in the credits of every single video, plus all of my videos totally free of YouTube ads as well. So if you do want to take your support for the channel another step further, just like everyone appearing on the screen right now again, that would mean absolutely everything to me and I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you all so very much. Let's start with what little we know about Ginjo's past as a Shinigami, because you'd think that was critical to the development of his Fullbring. After all, Ginjo is meant to be a dark reflection of Ichigo, right down to the fact that they are naturally occurring hybrids. The only difference, and it's a substantial difference to be fair, is that Ichigo also has Quincy in him as well, putting him one level above Ginjo, if we're going to look at it in a kind of binary hierarchy sense. Ginjo is a human who became a substitute Shinigami just like Ichigo, and just like Ichigo, his mother was infected with hollowification that was then passed on to him. Again, we have next to no detail about any of this. Did Ginjo go through the same kind of training as Ichigo? Did he also have to suppress his inner hollow in the same way? In the same way as the Vizard as well? Did it threaten to consume him? It feels like he would have had to, right? But again, we just don't know. And that's actually what I find annoying about the whole situation. I think Ginjo would have worked much better as an antagonist and a parallel of Ichigo if Kubo had really leaned into their similarities, but with the focus almost entirely on Fullbring, so much of what makes Ginjo who he really is either lost or left completely to guesswork. Like Ichigo, Ginjo was able to become a Fullbringer at some point too. Now, Ichigo's Fullbring revolves almost entirely around his Zanpakuto, which is a little odd when you think about it. I mean, it makes sense in Ichigo's case. Fullbring is technically a hollow power, and his hollow is his Zanpakuto, but then why does the Fullbring reflect Ichigo's false Quincy powers at every turn? Right from the design of the guard emerging from his badge to his Fullbring Bankai. I mean, the manga tells us essentially that his Fullbring manifests in this way, in this shape, because of course Ichigo is proud of his time as a Shinigami. In fact, he says that he can't remember a time when he wasn't proud of his Shinigami powers, his life as a Shinigami, and everything he achieved. I guess it would have been interesting, perhaps, for this moment to maybe foreshadow the truth, and Ichigo's Fullbring manifests in a slightly different way, and it makes Ichigo question why it wouldn't take on the form of his power as he knew it, because of course in reality that's not his actual Shinigami power. But I guess it's quite literally acting as a memory of some sort. I mean, Gingjo quite literally says the badge remembers Ichigo's power as it once was. It does feel a little murky, but I think it actually does work. Anyway, we're getting a little off track. The key point is that Ichigo's Fullbring resembles Zangetsu, right down to him being able to use a variation of Getsuga Tensho even before restoring his Shinigami powers. So, that begs the question, is Ginjo's Fullbring Cross of Scaffold based on or related to his previous Zanpakuto? If Gingjo really is supposed to be a reflection of Ichigo, sans the Quincy powers, then he too, presumably, was born of a Shinigami and a human who was infected with hollowification, and therefore, if Ginjo had latent Shinigami powers, even as a human, passed down to him by his father as Ichigo did, then his Zanpakuto, his latent Zanpakuto, that presumably he gained access to throughout his journey of becoming a substitute Shinigami, would have also been Shinigami and hollow, just like Ichigo's. See, that's another oddity with Ginjo. We know he had a Zanpakuto, or at least an Asauchi, thanks to that one lone shot we got of him in his Shinigami uniform. And yet, by the time we meet him, there is no Zanpakuto to be found, only a Fullbring, which he manifests from his cross pendant. And let's face it seems very unlikely that Ginjo was only wielding an Asauchi. What good would that be to a substitute Shinigami? If his role was the same as Ichigo's, and it stands to reason it was, then why on earth would he be patrolling his respective town with only an Asauchi, when even a new graduate of the academy would at least have a Shikai? So, why would Ginjo no longer have his Zanpakuto? It's definitely a weird case. Also, if we go back to the notion that he can steal Fullbring, like I said earlier, it does seem as well like he can straight up steal power in general. Soifon mentions in chapter 479 that Ginjo robbed Shinigami of their power, and if we move into the meat of this discussion, Ginjo's peculiar Bankai, well, he steals that too. Bankai obviously isn't a Fullbring ability. So, with all of that said, let's move on to our main topic. How could Ginjo use Bankai? Well, to cut a long story short, Ginjo is able to use Bankai because he steals Ichigo's power. Specifically, he steals Ichigo's ability to use Bankai. He effectively copies Ichigo's ability to use Bankai as a concept, which is really, really weird. It's weird because Ginjo doesn't copy Ichigo's Bankai itself. It's not like he's suddenly using Tensor Zangetsu, but he copies the ability of Bankai, which is also strange when you consider that he copies Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho. In chapter 458 and 459, Ginjo stabs Ichigo with Cross of Scaffold and then absorbs his Fullbring. He physically takes it, draining Ichigo of his Fullbring, ripping the power right out of Ichigo's substitute badge. This is why, when Ginjo is next seen, he's wearing a skeletal armor, very much akin to the one Ichigo had. He's wearing Ichigo's Fullbring and the power that comes with it. However, there's more to it than that. In chapter 470, when Ginjo unleashes a massive energy blast, Uryu theorizes that Ginjo didn't just take the surface layer of Ichigo's Fullbring, he's also stolen some of Ichigo's Ryoryoku as well, which is why the effect of the blast is so massive. It's literally imbued with Ichigo's own power. Uryu then reveals that Ichigo's Ryoryoku is literally mixed into Ginjo's, meaning there's now a chance that Ginjo can use Ichigo's own abilities, and we see that play out as Ginjo launches a Getsuga Tensho at Ichigo. Again, this is kind of weird. This is more than just copying someone's abilities. By stealing some of Ichigo's Ryoryoku, Ginjo is effectively copying the ability to use said abilities. He became capable of using Ichigo's powers almost as if he is him. It's like he's become a light version of Ichigo, quite literally. Uryu then warns Ichigo that Ginjo hasn't just stolen his Fullbring. In fact, he can use all of his abilities. Now, back in the day, we all had a bit of a chuckle that what that really meant was that Ginjo could just use Getsuga Tensho and that was it, but no, Bankai is included in this statement as well. What's a little strange though, I guess no more so than whatever else we've talked about so far, is that Shikai should also be included in that list of abilities, right? I mean, if Bankai is an ability, then so is Shikai. It's also funny that the fact Ichigo was currently wielding a fake Shikai and Bankai at the time of having his powers robbed didn't seem to matter. Again, like I said, it was as though Ginjo stole the concept itself. The thing is, based on the appearance of Ginjo's Bankai, it stands to reason that the skeletal armor we mentioned a minute ago, that version of Ginjo is actually his Shikai. Which I guess makes sense, but certainly at the time, it absolutely seemed as though he was meant to be depicted as wearing his own version of Ichigo's Fullbring, which itself was a admittedly neater, tidier, but still the same skeletal armor. And also, if it is the case that this is Ginjo's version of Shikai, then what does that mean for Cross of Scaffold? Is it implicitly linked to his past Zanpakuto? Or is it more a case of Cross of Scaffold is simply wearing the power of Shikai, just like Ginjo himself, and then wearing the power of Bankai, which is why the sword design changes as well? That seems likely to me, to be honest. Before we continue with the video, guys, a quick interruption. If you haven't yet hit subscribe, I am trying to hit 300,000 subs by the end of the year. It's only going to be possible with your help, and I would greatly appreciate it. Over 50% of my viewers aren't subscribed. It's a pretty good subscriber ratio, to be totally honest. I'm very grateful. Thank you to everyone who has hit that button. But if you're new here, or you haven't yet done so for whatever reason, please consider doing so today. You'll get alerted to my new videos when they release. You'll stay up to date with the channel as well. It's quick, it's free, it's easy to do, and I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you all very much. So at the end of chapter 475, Ginjo releases his so-called Bankai and transforms into the nebulous form at the center of this video. Again, the very idea of this is really weird and doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense simply due to the nature of Bankai and the relationship between a Shinigami and a Zanpakuto. It's kind of similar to the Sternritter being able to steal and use Bankai in the way they did. It doesn't really make sense beyond this idea that they are just stealing a construct, a reishi construct, or a surface layer. But even then, with the Sternritter, it's exceptionally weird that they could just straight up use the Bankai as we and the Shinigami knew them. That goes into the whole idea that I've brought up before of Yhwach introducing a new currency, power, that is nothing like we've seen previously in Bleach. So anyway, back to Ginjo. It's weird to think that simply by taking Ichigo's Raryoku, Ginjo can then just say Bankai and something happens. Like, to me, that is weird. As far as we know, like I said, Ginjo doesn't have a Zanpakuto to his person, so he quite literally is just copying the surface layer of what Ichigo is doing. He's saying Bankai, and his power is increasing to match. But then he actually undergoes a physical transformation, which again is odd. Speaking of which, in chapter 476, Ginjo's Bankai is revealed, and to confuse matters even further, Ichigo responds upon seeing it by saying, "That's right, I forgot, you're a substitute Shinigami also," as if stating that's the reason Ginjo can use Bankai, not the fact that he just stole it from Ichigo, as Uryu already said. Or is the fact that Ginjo can even use a facsimile of Bankai in the first place down to his substitute Shinigami roots? Maybe. But then wouldn't that just be the case for everything he's done in this fight to date, from using Getsuga Tensho to supposedly using a variation of Shikai? Anyway, as for Ginjo's Bankai itself, what does it actually do? How does it work? Once Ginjo transforms, we've established that he's now essentially wearing Ichigo's power to use Bankai, and yet in this form specifically, he calls out the fact that he also has hollow powers. Now, considering he's a Fullbringer, we've technically always known that. And I'm assuming it's the hollow essence inside of him that creates the skeletal armor in the first place, but they've never manifested in this way before. Now he has white hair and magenta eyes, which does resemble the look of a holified Shinigami, albeit not quite, as most holified Shinigami don't really have eyes like this. And of course, in the original black and white manga, they all kind of looked the same anyway. Same goes for like Aizen's transcendent eyes as well. It's only once we see them in Kubo's colour pages, which we do get for Ginjo's Bankai, that you learn of the eye's true nature. So even Ginjo's eyes are seemingly unique, and if I had to guess why, I would assume it's because again, he's not technically a Shinigami, and it's not even really using Shinigami power. It could just be a design choice, perhaps Kubo thought it looked cool, and it does, but if we were to dig a little deeper, I would assume it was because Ginjo isn't a holified Shinigami, even if technically he was at one point. Because again, Gingjo has walked a very similar path to Ichigo. That's kind of the point. Ginjo was born from a mother who was infected with holification, and so she passed that on to him, and then at some point he received Shinigami powers too, and became a substitute Shinigami. Now, you might think that this is where the crucial difference comes into play, that Ichigo always had latent Shinigami powers buried inside of him due to Isshin being his father, and that it's totally possible that Ginjo never did, that Ginjo didn't have a Shinigami parent, and therefore he wouldn't naturally have latent Shinigami powers as a human. So you might assume the Shinigami would have presumably just bestowed Shinigami powers upon him in a manner similar to how Rukia did to Ichigo in Chapter 1, and then we just assume that Ginjo must have lost those powers at some point. But all the way back in Chapter 433, as Ginjo explains basically the entire situation to Ichigo, what it means to be a Fullbringer, he reveals that Fullbringers are the natural opposites of substitute Shinigami. Humans with hollow powers and humans with Shinigami powers. Although I feel like that kind of gets flipped on its head a little bit in the Thousand Year Blood War arc once Quincy comes into play. Anyway, this is supposedly the basis for how a Fullbringer can give their power to a substitute Shinigami, and I think vice versa. Now, when Ginjo explains this to Ichigo in Chapter 433, you don't yet know that the substitute Shinigami in question that Ginjo is talking about is himself. And he tells Ichigo here in this chapter, there was once a person, someone other than you, who was born between a Soul Reaper and a human. So Ginjo is talking about himself there. It's his substitute Shinigami badge that he reveals to Ichigo in this moment. So, Ginjo's parentage is exactly the same as Ichigo's, save for the fact that presumably his mother wasn't also a Quincy. But somehow, somewhere, at some point in time before Isshin and Masaki, there was another Shinigami who met a human woman, they fell in love, and when the human woman was pregnant, she was infected with holification. Therefore, when Ginjo was born, he was Shinigami, human, and hollow, just like Ichigo, only missing the Quincy component. And then yes, there are the more granular details about Ginjo's parentage that we don't know, but which we can assume are probably not the same as Ichigo's. For example, the fact that Ichigo's father wasn't just a Shinigami, he was a noble captain Shinigami, which obviously lends Ichigo an awful lot more inherent Shinigami strength. I guess it's totally possible that Ginjo's father was similar, but again, it seems pretty unlikely to me. Anyway, considering what we know about Ginjo's makeup now that we've just gone through it, it's odd that his hollow powers manifested like this specifically during his Bankai. Why would that be? Is it a personal choice on his part? It could be a reflection of Ichigo, because Ichigo's hollow powers are his Zanpakuto, therefore they are both his Shikai and Bankai, and perhaps the same could be said of Ginjo based on what we've tried to glean. But on top of that, there's the fact that the power Ginjo stole from Ichigo wasn't even technically his real Zanpakuto. However, not only does Ginjo now have access to hollow powers, but he can seemingly use them in a much greater capacity than Ichigo has ever been able to do up until this point in the story, as he literally fires a Sero at Ichigo from the end of his sword during their battle. But And here's the kicker. If Ginjo can use Bankai thanks to stealing Ichigo's Raryoku, and therefore copying his abilities per se, then what that means is this is the very first time Ginjo has ever achieved this form. And yet he already knows how to fire a Sero. Ichigo isn't doing that of his own volition until the end of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Is this due to Ginjo's proficiency with Fullbring, which, as mentioned, is a hollow-based ability? It is interesting that Ginjo's Bankai does seem to incorporate elements from all of his being. The cross mark on his face, plus the energy strands that flow from his back, all seem to reference Fullbring. The strands take the shape of a cross, but more importantly, they seem to be made up of the same style of energy as Bringer Light. There's just one more thing I want to discuss in regards to Ginjo's powers: the name of his Fullbring. Cross of Scaffold has always been an interesting title for Ginjo to wield. After all, the very idea of a scaffold holds significance for Ichigo too, after he destroyed the scaffold in the Soul Society arc to rescue Rukia, in one of the most pivotal moments of the arc. It could be that Ginjo's stolen powers continue to build upon one another, making him stronger and stronger the more powers he steals, thus creating a foundation, or a scaffold that he continues to build upon. Then his Fullbring is the cross of scaffold itself, maybe the support that holds the scaffold together. And of course, it's telling as well that we don't ever learn his Bankai's name, probably because it doesn't have one, because it's a false Bankai. I don't know, that's really all only a theory of mine, but still, it's kind of interesting. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below regarding Ginjō Kugō's very strange powers. Powers that I really wish Kubo had gone into some more detail about, because there's a lot of new and odd concepts being introduced here. Fullbringers, substitute Shinigami, the crossover between the two, apparently that we never knew existed, the fact that Ginjo is the exact same makeup as Ichigo, that same hybrid, naturally occurring hybrid, that really Kubo should have done a lot more with, save for the fact that he doesn't have Quincy powers, but Ginjo should still be very strong in his own right. As always, I just wish more had been done with this guy. Thankfully, Can't Fear Your Own World gives him a decent amount to do, which is at least nice to see. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about Ginjo, his false Bankai, all of that. Do you think I'm right, or am I completely off base regarding my own thoughts and theories? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Alright guys, once again, consider hitting subscribe if you haven't done already to help support the channel on our journey to reach 300,000 subs by the end of 2026. Again, I would greatly appreciate it. And also check out the Patreon link down in the description below if you want to take your support for the channel that extra step further, just like everyone who's appearing in the credits right now is doing. At the $2 a month tier or higher, you can get every single one of my videos completely free of YouTube ads over there on Patreon, and of course your name in the credits as well. So do consider doing that today. Again, it would be greatly appreciated. Alright everyone, until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.